And so I have the distinct honor, as I mentioned, to present this award. And this award comes by way of Mary Kay Baum. Mary Kay is a longstanding member, as many of you know, of WNPJ and a former educator herself. Also very involved in politics to bring those voices of the unheard. As we've heard said that, beg your pardon, oops, so sorry. Quite the entertainment there. As we've heard, a riot is the language of the oppressed. And one of the things that, to be very clear, we're seeing from the students' encampments is not a riot, is a loud and clear call for the right to return. It is a loud and clear call for divestments. Why are universities being involved in the funding of a military in the first place? Right? It's a call to question ourselves about our choices in consumerism and where our money is actually a moral compass. It's a statement about our values. And so with that, I want to just call attention to very briefly to the artwork that Mary Kay has presented because it suits the professor so perfectly. And this is an original from Mary Kay. Please feel free if you will. We don't want things to go to the right. We're going to lean to the left on this one. See what I did there? So Professor, this is a piece of art from Mary Kay Baum, and this is the great blue heron. Mary Kay is an avid photographer, and while you have the sandpiper in Palestine, we have many different birds here as well in the Americas, plural. And so one of the things that I really appreciate about this, beg your pardon, for all who are watching at home. Oh, I beg your pardon. Okay, thank you all. So we actually have something in common between the two species. And this great blue heron does not always come back to the same nest, but it always comes back to the same rookery. So for example, the freshmen this year will be sophomores next year. The seniors this year will go on into the world. And so Professor here continues to come back to the rookery, although the nests may be different each year. And what I witnessed in that encampment was a moment of solidarity where an elder was providing for the young. And we are so honored, excuse me, just one more moment here. Thank you so much. Oh, likewise. What I would like to just say is that we need individuals like our elders and like our educators to continue to protect our young people, to guide them, to think critically, to examine another world as possible. And so with this, Professor, we honor from your new home in Wisconsin, not so new anymore, but as opposed to Palestine, please know that there is a connection both across nature and across nurture. And we are so grateful for all that you do, not only for our students, but for our community and for our world. So please join me in thanking Professor Alatout. Thank you. And wherever you'd like to display this. And now we have an opportunity to hear from the honoree himself. I will turn this over now to Professor Alatout. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. That's good. That's good. Thank you so much for an amazing first. I mean, my honor and my privilege to be here with Elena and Alan, amazing people. The whole time that when they were talking, I was thinking they should be the ones who receive the Peacemaker Award. And this is not just saying it, and it's not just a frivolous kind of credit to them, but I think most of us, probably all of us here, it speaks to how we think of ourselves and the others around us, how we think that we are all connected, that we probably are not as good as others think that we are, and that there are so many who are much better than we are. Like, for example, Elena and Alan. They are amazing, and you're all amazing. So thank you so much for this honor. And I am, like I said, I don't think of myself as deserving of it, but I love the fact that you decided to give it to me, right? I am proud of it personally, right? But at the same time, I'm proud of it because it's such a powerful statement that the Wisconsin Network of Peace and Justice is saying that there are a number of things that are connected, that dissent and protest are approaches to peace, that they deserve acknowledgement, but also that I am not only Palestinian, not only American, but now I made it to Wisconsinite, right? I am a Wisconsin person, and the layers of identity are very thinly kind of developed into each other and mixed together and make us all the people that we are, or the communities we are, right? And so, so I'm honored, and I think that in a way, I mean, I think of it as really a testament to the people who have been working all this year, right? Probably all of us. I mean, it comes under circumstances that none of us would like happened or have happened. We probably will gladly, all of us, let go of I mean, I wouldn't let go of the piece of art, amazing one, but we would probably let go of any award. Just give us one little child in Gaza back to life, or giving us just one arm of a child who lost it, right? We'll give everything back, all of this. So thank you so much. And you know, and all the conversation from Elena and Alan, I mean, they said so many things that I would have said too at the same time. And it shows that the connections of oppression, the circumstances of oppression and discipline and policing are very much general, right? They are global kind of forces that we need to pay attention to them as global forces, and they are connected. But I thought of what to say today, and initially I was like, okay, I'm going to talk about something academic. No, no way, right? I mean, I cannot even think academically anymore since the beginning of, you know, of this atrocious war, right? And so what I thought to do is to give you a little bit about myself, my kind of biography, if you will, and then to turn into, like, to end with some about what happened last year and how we came together and how everything that has happened unfolded. So in terms of biography, I mean, in 1967, when the war in the West Bank and Gaza, of course, the war happened in 1948, and I mean, I assume, I wish we could give you kind of maps to show you, but there are 1948 comes in, Palestinians, most of them are displaced, right, from what came to be known Israel later on, and the Palestinians, you know, became refugees, many of them. I was not. I was born in Nablus, which is in the West Bank. My family goes back to the 1400s. At least that's the recorded history. Our house in Nablus, for example, it's called like Alatout quarters, which has been built in 1804, right? So it's just a little younger than the US itself. And so I wake up in 1967, I was a child, and there is a possible war. Not yet a war, but there is a possible war. And we start trying to figure out how are we going whenever there is sirens, right? I mean, for an attack. And what do? We go to the shelters, but then which kid will carry what thing? I was entrusted, I don't know why, with my mother's gold and the papers of the family, my older sister was entrusted of carrying my brother, right, who was 2 years old. My mother was entrusted with something else, and my other sister was entrusted with carrying food, and we will run to the shelter and we will come out of the shelter depending on the day. And then one day we're in the shelter and there is a woman that comes into the shelter and says, hey, we should celebrate. The Syrian army and the Iraqi army are coming in from the east. So we're fine. Israel lost the war. Then 3 hours later, and everybody, of course, is crazily happy, right? We're not under occupation. But then 3 hours later, another one comes in and says, those were Israeli soldiers, right? This time they came from the east so that we don't move, right? They didn't want us to move at that point or be displaced at that very particular moment. And so we were under occupation. And when I became 11 years old, I'll tell you a story about how activism starts, right? I mean, so many people talk about how, there are adults that are totally out of it, right? They are evil, terrorists, they brainwash the kids, etc. Now, I was living with my mother and father and my 2 sisters and brother, and I was 11 years old, but we saw everything, right? Every single day, we will walk to the streets. I will walk to the school on the street and I will be stopped. I was like this, right? 8, 9, 10. I mean, we will be stopped on our way to school. We will be put against the wall. We will be hit. We will be, our dignities were always subject to brutal performance by the military forces. And we saw them kicking our fathers, our uncles, every single day, right? Every single day there are, curfews, there are searches and seizures, right? And there are, they come in and they, there is killing, there is shooting, there is whatever it is. But at 11, I mean, after watching all this, my older sister, who was 12 or 13, maybe, she's 1.5 years older than I am, but I was 11 at the time. And so we decided that we have to do something, right? Because every single person has an inner or a very profound force for liberty and for freedom and for having the possibility of a free life. And so we decided we had to do something. And so we formed a party. We didn't have any relationships with anyone. We didn't have any relationships with political activists. We had nothing. Like, she's 12 and I'm 11, right? I mean, we don't even go outside the house. Our initial understanding of the world comes from what? Comes from Jewish intellectuals that we read really heavily, even at that young age. We read literature, Russian, American, Latin American, any number of things, right? Palestinians, right? And so there was a huge commitment, a huge love, a huge understanding, right, of the need for liberty, the need for freedom. And so we made a party. We called it, I mean, don't react too badly for the violent title of the party. The party was the Palestinian Bloody Resistance Party, right? For the liberation of Palestine. And what we did is we distributed, my sister and her friend who was with us, we wrote some leaflets. I took them to distribute them. They wrote them because we were really smart, right? We knew that if I'm caught while I'm distributing them by the Israeli forces, then they will make me write it. And so that they don't know it's me, right? I didn't write it. Then anyway, my sister and her friend wrote it, and I distributed them. But where would an 11-year-old really think of distributing leaflets like that, that's calling for the freedom of Palestine? in the neighborhood, right? So around us, in the building, in our own building, in the stores, just putting them here and there. So anyway, to make the story shorter, a neighbor of ours who was like about 90 years old was holding this leaflet that I gave him that we put it in his house, and he was really scared. So I pretended not to know anything, and I pulled it out of his hand. It tore a little bit. But what did he do? Because he was really scared, he went to the police and told them, hey, look, we received this. And that was in the beginning of occupation, of course. People are really scared. This guy was actually a refugee from Jaffa. And so it makes sense that he will be scared. But the first question they asked him, why is it torn? And the thing he said, it's our neighbor kid, right? He pulled it to read it for me. Now, the problem is that the police, of course, probably knew exactly how old the person who wrote those things are, right? So if I'm 11 years old, then it makes sense to bring this 11 years old. And that was my first direct interaction with police violence. I was 11. They took me to the interrogation center. They came to the house with 3 cars or Jeeps, right? And they took me and they took my mother. They told her, follow us, like, because I'm 11 years old. And so they took me to this interrogation center where they hit me, kicked me, put me in a chair, like a small chair in the middle of a room. And there were like 5 of them and, you know, asking me stuff like that. And then they asked me to write the same words. And of course, I didn't write it. So I was freed for that. But I spent 3 hours under interrogation and police violence, right? And I couldn't confess, because if I confess, I will have to tell on my sister, for example, right? And I have to tell on my sister's friend. So I kept my mouth shut. What happens next is that when they released me 3 hours later with my mother, is that I spent probably about 2 weeks bedridden with a temperature of like more than 104, 105, right? And it's because I am traumatized, right? Before we made our party, I was traumatized by occupation. And before occupation, I was traumatized by the stories of all these refugees that I know, and all of these stories about 1948 and about camps and refugee camps and needs and poverty and any number of things, right? And killing and torture. And then, of course, I started the road that brings me to here, right? This is where the kind of the transitions that have happened in my life from 1971 until now have been constantly, until I came to the US, every single move I did in my life was controlled by others. You have no idea how much our lives are controlled, right? Like, for example, my identity card or my ID or my kind of papers, who am I? What kind of passport do I have? Changed like 5 times. Not because I wanted, but because of political calculations in the area. But every single time that changes, you are awake at night. You don't know what happens. You're worried. Your mother is worried. Your parents are worried. Everybody is worried. Are we going to stay here? Are we going to move? What are we going to do? Where are we going to go? And every single time I had to move under these pressures. Never had I decided to move to somewhere, right, on my own. Even coming to the US was because my passport is ending. The Jordanians, I had a Jordanian passport. The Jordanians have separated us from them, the West Bankers, right? Because we were under them anyway. It's a long history and long story. But they separated and they said, okay, you're on your own. Now my passport is about to end. Where am I going to go? I have to go back to Palestine, but I couldn't really because of politically I couldn't. I just had a lot of whatever issues. And then where do I go? So I chose the US, and I had a visit visa. I had to come here. I went through struggles and struggles in order to go to a university and then to go to the PhD. What I'm saying is that throughout all of this, we had to create kind of our own paths, but those paths were unfair, right? It was an unfair kind of, in my case, 60 years, right, of life. But in other people's lives, 90 years. And how long more? How long? What will happen in the future? What's happening with the kids now? Anyway, this is too much focus on me, and I didn't mean it to be that long, but I want to bring you back to Gaza. So back to Gaza. When Gaza initially happened, I was dormant. And what I mean by dormant, I was tired. I've been fighting big fights. I've been traveling a lot, traveling as in life, not in from place to place. The trauma was really deep. And I somehow kind of stopped this activism, right? The constant one, where I will march for Vieques, for example, or where I will march for people of color anywhere. And I did that all the time until like recently. And then I decided, I need space. And Gaza happened. Before Gaza happened, a number of Zionist organizations have attacked me, right? Constantly. And even though I was dormant, I mean, I wasn't doing anything. And they still attacked me because probably a good Palestinian, like they say, I mean, a number of them said that, is a dead Palestinian, right? A number of Israeli officials, even in government now, that's what they say. Like a good Palestinian is a Palestinian that does not exist. So for me, when it happened, and my wife is here, Stacy, what happened is that I was about to lose it, like literally. I mean, I was awake all time, from news to news. And then I decided, you know what? I need to do something. I have to do something. I was almost like in a, I don't know, like unable to focus on anything, like going crazy. And so I decided, you know what? I'm going to go to the capital, and I'm going to go on hunger strike. I got my kids down, 13 and 16, and my wife, and I said, you know what? If I die, don't worry. I am committed to this. And I am now literally willing to die. I don't have any problem. If they send, what do you call them? Those drones now and shoot me because I'm speaking, that's fine. And I tell my kids now, don't worry about me, right? I want you to be strong. I don't even want you to do anything for Palestine if you don't want to, right? My story ends today in the sense that my commitments to Palestine came anew, exploded, pun not intended. They exploded. I couldn't rest. I was crying. I was depressed. I was not believing the amount of trauma that this genocidal regime is enacting in Gaza. And that was the first month. Imagine now, right? So I was like, I'm going to do a hunger strike. If I die, whatever. They talked me out of it. But then that's when I started, okay, I have to spend that energy somehow, right? And I started refocusing everybody in Gaza over everything that I do, right? That's where the struggle is. Those are the people who need us. Those are the people who should be protected. That's what we are for. And if this moment is that one moment, and I decided that it's the moment that is testing every single one of us, not Palestinians, not Arabs, not Muslims, not Americans, everybody. It's testing our understanding of what a human is, what a future we want, and how do we build that future? What do we do? And so I wasn't even thinking about Palestinians necessarily. I mean, of course, they are the people I love. They are of me and I am of them. They are my kinship. They are my story, my heart, right? But at the same time, I know that it's about also Israelis, and it's about Jews, and about Muslims, and about Americans, and about everybody else. And so how do you manage to weave a line where you are strongly and without hesitation on the side of the people who are being genocided, right? And yet at the same time, protect yourself from getting into the anti-Semitic, the anti, whatever it is, the anti that you want, right? How do you do that? How do you manage that? So I saw, of course, Palestinians will say, I mean, some of them say anything, right? And I don't blame anyone who says anything, by the way. I mean, I don't really care if they sound anti-Semitic, right? I just don't want it. And I don't want to do it, and I will fight it. But I can understand how people talk, right? And so for me, it became a huge element in what constitutes our totality. How do we, Palestinians and Israelis, Jews and Muslims and Arabs, I mean, I don't like these really distinctions, but how can we bring about a new world in a peaceful way, right? It doesn't seem possible. And so, but I do think that Palestinians have the right to resist, and resist in any shape, way, or form that they think is right. I might not do some of the tactics, I might not choose some of the tactics, but I will stand by them, I will defend them, like I did with the students here in encampment, right? I mean, the students did an encampment. I had a part for negotiating some things with the administration, but that didn't get me really anywhere because you saw how I was treated. I don't know how many of you saw my images in the news, bloodied face and all of that. And I still, what is ironic is that yesterday I had a pre-trial meeting because I did something wrong but with the encampment and with defending the students. And here I'm being honored for the same reason. It's amazing. And that should tell you something about it, right? That the distinction is not between Israeli and Palestinian, even though everybody wants us to believe that, right? And everybody, you know, and maybe most Israelis are really fascist now, right? But even though, but it's not between Israelis and Palestinians, between Muslims and Christians or Jews. It is between those who support genocide and those who do not. Those who support a new community to emerge and those who do not. Those who are able, capable, and courageous enough to try to fashion and shape the new future, the coming years, and those who think that they cannot. There are so many people who feel that they cannot do things, right? And there are so many people who feel that they can. We here are part of that group that is so we are part of the group that is saying that we need to actually participate in the making of the new future. How do we do that in Wisconsin? How do we do that? I mean, we cannot do that in isolation. So for example, decolonization have to start here. Decolonization means Ho-Chunk Nation should be repatriated as much as possible every single day that we make decisions. It should be, the decisions should be made according to an ethical standing that says indigenous populations should get back whatever that was stolen from them. I don't know how, I don't know when, I don't know, and I disagree with Elena. She said that it's probably not possible. I think it is possible, and that you might come back and celebrate the land here. And this is coming to you from a Palestinian who is being like decimated now, right? There is always hope. There is always a chance. And we can determine it because that's us. We are the people, right? Who said that, right? I mean, we are the people who can shape things. Of course, the forces against us and against the people who think with love and compassion and relations and try to figure out a new way of kinship that doesn't depend on economic and technical kind of relations, but it becomes relations of compassion and love. We have to do that. I mean, there is no way that we, and I mean, I believe that, I mean, I renewed my belief. Of course, I stopped and became dormant for a while, but I renewed my belief that it's not a goal, that liberation is not really a goal. Liberation is a process. Liberation is today. Liberation is in every act that one can do or does. That's what liberation is. It's the moment that we are here. We are acting in liberty. We are taking command. We are commanding our present. We are re-understanding our past, and we are reflecting on our future. So we are doing it, right? So it's not like, I mean, I don't think, for example, with Palestinian suffering, which is huge. I mean, the trauma is unbelievable. Elena, I have no idea how you deal with it. I really don't. I mean, it's even your trauma is longer, way longer than ours, and probably more extreme because at least we are still like in the middle of whatever that they think it's a fight, right? But I mean, even in the midst of this trauma, I still think that it's not possible to, or at least I cannot accept the notion that imperialism or militarism or ecocide, like ecological killing, basically, that's a foregone future. It's still coming, but we have in our hands the possibility, the ability, and the responsibility to fashion a new future and to take it out of this capitalist, militarist, and imperialist kind of relations that were forced on all of us. Anyway, I mean, I think I want to finish with highlighting one thing. In northern Gaza, there is a refugee camp that's called Jabalia. In the last 2 days, the Israeli forces have been adamant on finishing northern Gaza. Somehow, there is something that's cooking up in their imagination and probably in conjunction with the US, but there is something cooking up where they want to clear northern Gaza. Northern Gaza is the part that was subject to the most violent attacks, right? That's the part where they asked people to vacate long ago in the beginning of the war. However, the people of Jabalia and people in the north stayed. Many of them rejected the orders to evacuate. And there are about 250 or 300,000 of them still there. And now the Israelis decided the order, they just again ordered them that they have to evacuate. And they said, no food, no water if you decide to stay. And at the same time, they started a huge campaign of carpet bombing every single place. Like, I mean, we're saying, you know, imagine that I'm saying that this is worse than what happened in the last 12 months, right? It's unbelievable, the atrocities that are happening. So please keep them in your mind. Whatever you're doing, try to investigate what's happening there. Follow Palestinian, there are a couple of Palestinian journalists there who are reporting from there. Follow them, follow the news on Jabalia, and keep it up in your social media, in your conversations, because they are adamant at reducing it to an inhabitable place. I mean, we already in Gaza, there were 90,000 tons of explosives. Do you know how many Hiroshima's bombs these are? 6. 6 bombs of Hiroshima kind of style have been thrown on Gaza, on that population. So please keep them in your mind. And you know, I hope we can continue. I promise that I will continue my activism with also Native Americans and with people of color all over, with people who need rent, who lack housing, who are poor, who are unable to meet the challenges of this atrocious capitalist, violent police state. We need to keep working for them. And I think many of us have much more we have a place, a position where we can speak from that might actually uplift certain people, which you did with me, right? And thank you. I thank you for that. You uplifted the Palestinian issue. God knows what attacks you will be subjecting yourselves to in the coming weeks, but but you're used to that. But you know, I mean, I think you're uplifting me, but I really ask and beg that we keep Palestinians, but not only Palestinians, people in the Congo, for example, that suffering, people in the Sudan, that suffering is unbelievable. And we are kind of, as a US-centered people, we are the beneficiaries of all these wars. We really are. Not everybody in the US, of course. I mean, some of us are beneficiaries of those wars. And we have to start like kind of put our foot down as citizens to tell them, no, stop, and we will not allow that. But thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you.